So what's the political impact of Brett Kavanaugh's hearings, and how will his confirmation or rejection affect the midterms? Let's talk about that and the president's new trade deal with Canada and Mexico with our political panel. Chris Shays, the former U.S. Representative from Connecticut. He served as senior member of the Finance and Homeland Security Committees, Vice Chairman of the Budget and Government Oversight Committees, and Chairman of the Government's Oversight National Security Committee, with jurisdiction over both the Departments of Defense and State. He joins us from Capitol Hill. And in Seattle is Chris Lu, former White House Cabinet Secretary and former Deputy Secretary of Labor during the Obama administration. He's now a senior fellow at the University of Virginia Miller Center. And he is, as I said, in Seattle. All right, Christopher, there are contradictory reports about the scope of the inquiry of Brett Kavanaugh. Trump said it's up to the Senate. Should it be longer than a week?
Oh, my word. I don't think it should be longer than a week. Shame on Feinstein for waiting almost 2 months to encourage Ford to come forward. You know, I am so turned off by both parties and how they've handled this. And I find this whole process embarrassing and, frankly, almost disgusting.
Chris Lu, what are your thoughts? Should it be more than a week? What can happen?
Well, I don't think it should be artificially time limited. And I think what's concerning to me is some of the initial news reports that certain witnesses will not be investigated. We should let the FBI do their job. These are seasoned professionals who do this for a day-to-day. And, you know, they should take the evidence where it leads them. Whether it should be 1 week, 2 weeks, I don't know what the answer to that is. It should not be indefinite to say that, though.
Okay. Do you think the outcome of the inquiry is going to change any minds in the Senate, or is that still open, Chris?
I think I think it depends on what the evidence finds. I think it's probably more likely than not that the FBI investigation will be inconclusive and will be exactly where we were last week. But again, you know, these are rapidly changing events. There are witnesses who have stories that need to be told, and they'll tell them to the investigators. So we'll see what happens. But if I were making a prediction, I think it probably won't change any minds on either side.
Chris Shays, what about his deportment, Kavanaugh's deportment last week, his judicial temperament? Do you have a question over that?
A little bit. I mean, with all due respect, this is dividing the country. My wife and I have agreed we can't really have an in-depth conversation about it. I just want to say I've met so many women that are outraged, and I've met so many men that are outraged, and they come on different ends on the equation. I'm trying to remember what happened in high school. You know, but I'll be very candid in saying to you, I don't think Kavanaugh has told the truth. If I had been advising him, I would have said, listen, you were in high school, you did some dumb things, you probably had interaction with Ford and Christine Ford, but your recollection is probably different than hers. I would have been more comfortable him saying, you know, please judge me on who I am, not what I was in high school, and I don't think I did anything terrible in high school. And then the debate would be on that. Now my concern is he's been so emphatic that he doesn't know her, that it never happened, and so on. And so time will tell if he had contact. If he had contact with her and it's proven, then he's finished.
Chris Lu, if it turns out that they can't show anything about contact with her, but they can show that he lied about things in high school, things in the yearbook, lied about drinking. If he lied, would that automatically toss his name out?
Well, I think it depends on what he has lied about, but I agree completely with what the congressman just said, because Kavanaugh has issued such blanket denials on everything, even the smallest of things. And I think if he is found to have been misleading on small things, whether it's entries in his high school yearbook or whether it's drinking habits, again, none of these otherwise should be disqualifying. But because if he raises doubts about those issues, or if doubts are raised about those issues, it does call into question his overall credibility. And I think to your question about deportment, I look, if somebody was wrongly accused, I can understand his outrage. But I think the statements he made in his opening about this being a conspiracy by the Clintons does call into question whether he has the right temperament to sit on the Supreme Court and deal with cases fairly. But again, we have a long way to go before this is resolved.
Senator Graham is vowing to launch a wholesale investigation into the Democrats on the committee and their handling of Christine Ford's allegations. What do you make, Congressman Shays, about Lindsey Graham, his attitude the other day, and calling for a full investigation of the Democrats?
Well, he had a kind of ugly face when he was speaking with such compassion, and I would have loved it if he had just toned it down a little bit. But I feel the same outrage. And I feel this way because I remember Mark Foley. The Democrats knew about Mark Foley for months and months and months, but then they disclosed it in October. Feinstein knew for 2 months that there was this allegation. And in my judgment, what she should have said is, you were raped, you need to step forward. If you're not willing to step forward now, forever hold your peace. The fact that she introduced it at the very end, I have no comfort level with the sincerity of the Democratic colleagues. And then to have some members question him on his whether or not he's lying, especially a member who, you know, Kavanaugh should have said, "You're right, Senator, I wasn't Vietnam either." I mean, give me a break.
Chris Liu, do you think an investigation of the Democrats is warranted?
Well, look, I don't think it's warranted, and I think we can agree that last week was not one of the finer moments of the U.S. Senate in the way that on both sides this investigation was handled. But I think it's important for senators, as ostensibly role models and as public figures, to try to take down the temperature a little bit. And so, look, I applaud Senator Flake, Senator Murkowski, and others for saying, you know, let's just take a step back. We don't want this nomination or confirmation to be tainted by this cloud. Let's do this investigation. Let's see where it leads. I think that's a sensible approach. I'd like to think that after the heat of the battle is over, Senator Graham will understand that, further investigating his colleagues doesn't do anything to help the institution of the U.S. Senate.
Let's move to another area. Chris Shays. I don't like to toot my own horn, but back in the early 90s, I did the famous Perot-Gore debate, which changed the attitude and got NAFTA passed. In fact, Bill Clinton called me the day after and said, I owe you big time. All right, now.
Larry, you know why we owe you big time? Because you're not a partisan. You don't try to persuade people one way or the other. You give your people on your program an opportunity to state what they think. No, you are an unusual person, especially in this day and age.
All right, Congressman Shays, what do you make about Thank you, Chris. What do you make, Congressman Shays, about the new deal of NAFTA, U.S., Canada, and Mexico?
Well, I am grateful as can be that there is an agreement. I question if it's all that different. You know, it's almost like I have a feeling that President Trump just wants to be able to call it the Trump trade agreement instead of NAFTA. But at any rate, there are trade agreements that need to be changed, and he's obviously caught the spirit of the American people who believe that. But I'm just grateful there's an agreement. Let me put it that way.
All right, Chris Liu, what are your thoughts on this new NAFTA?
Well, I agree completely with Congressman Shays. This feels like another Donald Trump manufactured crisis where he's basically taken most of the existing elements of NAFTA, sprinkled in some things from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that he pulled out of, and then is repackaging it as his own deal. Look, free trade is a good thing. It's especially good with our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. But I'm frankly a little skeptical that this new agreement is very much different than the one that he's been bashing on the campaign trail for the last couple of years.
Christopher Shays, the president says the new deal means hundreds of thousands of American jobs. You agree?
Who knows? I mean, the president says so many things that aren't true that then that's his problem. Then when do you believe him, when don't you? I hope it does.
Will Congress ratify it next year, Mr. Liu?
I hope so, but obviously, trade agreements are difficult there, trade agreements don't neatly break down on party lines, and you have just as many folks in the Democratic Party and Republican Party that don't like free trade agreements, and so it's going to really require the president rolling up his sleeves and working with members of Congress to try to get them on board. But trade agreements are never easy to get passed.
And Larry, if I could just jump in, this is the danger that we face with this president. Trade is absolutely essential. You can have nationalism and self-interest, and that leads to war, in my judgment, or you can start to have people think in more global terms about interacting and the importance of having good relationships with your neighbor. That's trade.
Well, do you think enough Republicans agree with you, Chris Shays?
Yes.
You do?
Yep.
Chris Lou, do you think the party will stand with do you think he'll get this through?
I think Chris Shays makes an important point. I mean, look, we can stipulate that there were some issues with NAFTA that needed to be addressed, but this was a trade agreement that got done in a very difficult fight, 25 years ago. Not clear that the improvements that have been made, again, the details haven't been announced, whether the improvements that have been made justify trying to have another fight in Congress right now. As I said, the politics of trade are very complicated, and they don't neatly break down by party lines.
Chris Shays, we'll go to another area. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is going to meet with President Trump this week. Is he going to keep his job?
Who knows? I would think he keeps his job until at least the election. But, I don't know under what basis he shouldn't keep his job, but maybe others do.
You have a thought, Chris Lou?
I hope the Deputy Attorney General keeps his job as well. I've been concerned, as many Americans are, about the erosion of the rule of law. And, it feels to me like the president's attacks on the Justice Department, whether it's the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, are all rooted in the Mueller investigation and the fact that the president feels this is unfair. And so, yeah, I think he probably does keep his job from now until Election Day, but I think all bets are off after that. The question is whether he can ever get anyone replaced and reconfirmed for any of these openings at the Justice Department.
Chris Shays, the big rumor is Lindsey Graham's going to be the next Attorney General. You buy that?
Well, if he takes it, he's a fool.
Why?
Why give up being in the Senate so you can have the president bash you all the time?
Chris Lou, do you think it's his if he wants it?
It probably is, but I agree with Congressman Shays. It's probably the worst job in Washington. The Attorney General is the Attorney General of the United States. That is not supposed to be the president's personal lawyer, and so notwithstanding my disagreements with Senator Graham on many policy issues, he's a very principled individual, and if he's going to do the job the way it's supposed to be done, he's going to get crosswise with the president, and so I don't see why he would take that job either.
I mean, think about it. He gives up being in the Senate, he takes the job, and then gets fired, and then what is he?
He's an analyst on Fox News.
And making more money, I agree.
Chris Shays, over the weekend, Trump said that he and Kim Jong Un fell in love because of the beautiful letters Kim had written him. What do you make of that, Chris Shays?
Well, Chris and I agree on so many things. I don't know if he'll agree on this one, but the bottom line is Trump likes anyone who likes him. And if you flatter him, then he likes you. But having said that, whatever it takes to get North Korea to move in a different direction, I support.
And Chris Lou, what do you make of the Korean situation?
Yeah, I'll continue to agree with Congressman Shays on this. I mean, I think let's just take a step back. Kim Jong Un is one of the world's most ruthless dictators. He has starved his people. He is developing nuclear capabilities that could strike the United States. He is a dangerous actor. And yes, engagement with him is a good thing. But I think, the president unfortunately kind of oscillates between threatening nuclear war and embracing dictators. I'd like to think, or I'm hoping that this is just imprecise language on his part, but let's not forget the real threat that North Korea poses. And following the summit in Singapore, we've yet to see a lot of tangible progress made on some of the commitments that were announced at that time.
Chris Shays?
Can you allow me the opportunity to agree with Chris, since he's been so generous the other way? I totally agree with him.
All right, gentlemen. Chris Shays, November 6th. What's going to happen in the Senate, in the House and the Senate?
Both parties are in danger of losing, and both parties are in danger of winning.
Danger of winning.
Well, we have some very huge problems, and the majority party is not going to be able to get anything done unless they can work with the minority party, and neither seem to want to work with the other parties. So who's ever in power, they're not going to be able to deliver unless there's a sea change in how our members in the Congress, the House members in the Senate, work with each other.
Chris Liu, how do you see it?
Well, I think all signs are pointing to a pretty significant Democratic wave. I think that's enough to take back the House. The only question is how big a majority they have. They're going to take back some important governorships, not only in the Midwest, but potentially in the Southeast as well. The Senate may be out of reach at this point, but look, we are 5 weeks or so away from Election Day. That's an eternity in this news cycle. So who knows?
Chris and Chris, thank you both. Always great having you with us.
Thank you. You take care.